Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Raptors are doing everything they can to stay out of the play-in, and a win over Miami certainly helped. Also, the Knicks are still clinging on to the East 3 seed after taking down the Celtics. And just how high should draft analysts be on Lilliputian Indiana corner D'Angelo Pons?
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Toronto Raptors are fighting off an unwanted spot in the play-in, and their Thursday night victory over Miami helped their case with just 2 games left in the regular season. Locked On Raptors postcast host Zulfi Sheikh reacted to Brandon Ingram's strong performance, helping the Raps smother and sweep the Heat.
All right, before getting into the specifics of tonight's game, for those that needed a reminder of why tonight was a huge game for the Raptors, I'm sure a lot of you do know, but I think there was 2 main reasons. The Raptors were obviously jockeying for a playoff spot, and with the win, I believe they should have jumped to 5th in the Eastern Conference since they have the tiebreaker with the Atlanta Hawks, which is obviously huge for the Raptors' playoff chances. But the second reason for me, at least, was that this mini series against the Heat in Toronto was going to be this Raptors team's first taste of playoff style hoops, in the sense that they're facing a team right away after having seen them. So that team, especially an Eric Spoelstra-led team, gets to make some adjustments. There's also really big stakes in this game. There's obviously pressure. Yes, the Miami Heat can't jump into the playoffs, but they can jump into the top half of the play-in bracket, which is obviously a much easier path to get into the playoffs. And that's something that is going to be important for them in these last couple of games. So that was going to be the reason why the Heat were obviously going to take this game very seriously as well. So for the Raptors, it was the first taste of how could Scottie Barnes and Darko Rakovic and the crew handle the pressure of needing to do what they did on Tuesday and doing it again, but doing it again against the same team that was obviously going to come out with a different effort. And boy, did the Raptors pass that test with flying colors. I thought they did a fantastic job with that tonight, especially early in this game, when I think it was before coming into this game where we said we'd be surprised if the Heat kind of went down without a fight like they did that last game on Tuesday. And early on, it looked like the Heat were going to do exactly that. They're going to come in with a different effort. They took a quick 7-0 lead to start the game. Darko Rakovic had to call a timeout less than 2 minutes into the game. Tyler Hero had started hot. He had made 3 of his first 4 shots. Bam even hit a early 3. And then to compound on that, Scottie Barnes picked up his second foul, essentially less than 5 minutes into the game. And it felt like the Miami Heat were really going to take control of what was going on. But the Raptors responded beautifully after that timeout called by Darko Rakovic. And without Scottie Barnes on the floor for the rest of that first quarter, essentially 8 minutes, the Raptors outscored Miami 26-17, and they were able to kind of take control from there. Miami kind of charged back in the second quarter, made it a 4-point game, but that's when the Raptors defense really showed up and locked in this game. Toronto went on a 24-6 run to end the second quarter, so 2 strong closes to quarters for them. They held Miami to 2 of 8 shooting during that 24-6 run. They held Miami to without a field goal for nearly 5 minutes during that run. The Raptors were basically able to keep the Heat at arm's length from there. And again, it was just because of this very tidy and disciplined approach. They led by as many as 19 at halftime. There was a mini scare in the third quarter, but the Raptors were even able to handle that. And we'll talk about that a bit later as well. But overall, like I said, it was just a very disciplined effort by Toronto. It was another strong game on the offensive glass. The Raptors were plus 8 for second chance point. They had 22 tonight. They had 23 the other night against Miami. It's an area that they just dominated throughout the Heat this season and took care of that tonight, especially. CMB, shout out to him. He really led that effort. And then on the other side of the basketball with the ball in their hands, again, how about just 6 turnovers for 9 points by the Raptors? Whereas on the other side, the Raptors forced Miami into 15 turnovers for 24 points. So again, the defense really found its form. It's done that against the Heat this season, and that was impressive to see. But largely, if I had to describe what this game was, it was a very uber aggressive effort led by Brandon Ingram. He finished with a season high 38 points. He was awesome this one, and we'll talk about him more obviously as this episode continues. But it's also the bench guys, namely, that were making hustle play after hustle play. Now, IQ and Scottie were a bit quieter tonight. Scottie had 13 points on 4-6 shooting. Emmanuel quickly with 11 on 4 of 10. But they did hit some loud shots, I felt, in the fourth quarter. And by that, I mean they hit some shots that really got the crowd going. It kind of erased any late hope by the Miami Heat. IQ had a big 3 in the fourth quarter. Scottie had the first 5 points of the fourth quarter with a triple of his own, and then he had a big dunk as well that forced a Heat timeout. So again, quieter game for them, but they were allowed to close this game. But I wanted to go back to the idea of like how aggressive the Raptors were, namely a guy like Brandon Ingram. And I thought that's really what helped Toronto get the job done tonight in this game. They were being intentional about the contact, but they were also being rewarded for it. So I wanted to make sure we talked about that in our turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
Like, despite this being a generally more efficient and I guess you can say aggressive Miami Heat offense tonight, especially early on in this game. And look, hey, you can see the Miami Heat actually were able to score more than 100 points against the Raptors for the first time this season. So that was a positive for them, I guess. But even despite that, the Raptors were able to really manage this game. And that's with Miami having 10 more points in the paint than the Raptors did, which obviously last game we talked about how the Raptors dominated the paint. They had over 60 points in the paint, and they really kind of took care of business there. But despite that being the other way around, the Raptors were able to counter that by being aggressive in the sense that they didn't settle, and they were not only taking contact, but they were initiating it, and they were playing through it. When I talk about only 6 turnovers tonight, I think a part of it is because they weren't just trying to foul bait and make reckless plays, hoping they would get the foul call out of it. They were being smart about how they were going through contact and fighting through it. And again, playing to the whistle, and they were subsequently rewarded for that. The Raptors got to the line a ton tonight, and they made their freebies of it. At halftime, they were minus 12 in the paint, but they were plus 16 on made free throws. Brandon Ingram had taken more free throws in the first half with 11 than the Heat had as a team with 7. And again, it wasn't foul baiting. It wasn't ref shenanigans. I think other than Tyler Hero complaining and getting a tag, none of the Heat players were really like outraged by the whistle or anything during this game. It was just the Raptors putting their head down and getting downhill to get to the free throw line, get inside the paint, take contact.
Stay up to date all year on the Toronto Raptors by subscribing to Locked On Raptors on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Knicks survived the battle against the Celtics. Before we get to that, Rory McIlroy picked up where he left off at the Masters. The NBA playoffs are here, where every possession matters, every matchup is magnified, and every game can swing a series. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers a great way to get in on the action. You can bet just $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. The app makes it easy to follow the action with player stats, trends, and matchups all in one place. And during the playoffs, that extra insight really matters when you're looking at stars, role players, or key moments. It just makes the entire playoff game experience more engaging from start to finish. Head to FanDuel.com to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Rory McIlroy admitted the nerves were still there on the first tee at Augusta, and that's exactly how he wants it. In his first Masters round since completing the career Grand Slam, McIlroy fired a 5-under 67 to grab a share of the lead despite not playing his best golf. He hit just 5 fairways, but leaned on patience and experience, making smart decisions instead of forcing shots, a clear shift from past Augusta struggles. Even out of position, he still found birdies, looking far more in control than the version of himself that used to press here. Now the question becomes whether that composure can carry him to something only Tiger Woods has done lately, gone back to back with green jackets. Over in the NBA, LeBron tried to carry the Lakers past the Warriors.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked On Lakers podcast. The Lakers get a 119-103 win over the Warriors in SF. It was against a very depleted Golden State, including no Steph Curry, but also on the heels of 3 losses for the Lakers, the last featuring some tension between JJ Redick and a few players. So they really needed a palate cleanse, and they needed a win to try to keep their 4 seed. 26 points, 8 rebounds, 11 assists, plus 2 steals and a block for LeBron James, who briefly scared Laker fans when he left the game after hurting his hand on the backboard on a blocked shot, but he re-entered the game and looked absolutely fine. 21 points for DeAndre Ayton, all 5 Laker starters in double figures, a potentially more difficult game ahead of them Friday versus the Phoenix Suns, but this was a win that they really needed to get, even if the competition was not particularly impressive. For more Lakers coverage, make sure you're watching Locked On Lakers on YouTube and listening wherever you get your podcasts.
In baseball, the Marlins topped the Reds,
but they bounced back with a much-needed win on Wednesday, and things looked bleak out of the gates, and you're sitting there saying, oh boy, here we go again. The Marlins are sliding, and it's early. Yuri Perez comes out. He allows 2 runs in the first inning of the game. and it looked not good. The Marlins were down 2-0 out of the gates. 2 unearned runs as a rare Graham Pauley error in that first inning allowed the first run to score, and then they got 1 more with 2 outs as well. But the Marlins didn't falter. They didn't waver. They didn't get down on themselves. They came right back in the bottom of the first, scored 2 in the bottom of the first, followed it up with 2 more in the bottom of the second. Griffin Conine home run in the third really widened the gap in that game, made it 6-2 at that point, and the Marlins did not look back after that. The Fish get the win 7-4 last night. Connor Norby adds a late home run in that ball game as well. This was the best response you could possibly ask for after that Tuesday night loss. They didn't let things spiral. They got down 2-0 in this ball game. They didn't blink. They came right back.
And on the ice, the Penguins picked up a 5-2 win over the Devils, clinching a spot in the playoffs for the first time in 3 seasons.
For the first time since the 2021-2022 season, the Pittsburgh Penguins are going back to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And not only are they going back to the Stanley Cup playoffs, games 1 and 2 will be at PPG Paints Arena. The Penguins with a huge, gutsy 5-2 win over the New Jersey Devils. And this was not at all the Penguins' cleanest game of the year. There were some mistakes. There were some hiccups. There were some, I would say, troubling things, but we got plenty of time to worry about that.
The Cavs are doing everything in their power to swipe the 3 seed away from the Knicks, but New York is now a clean game up on Cleveland in the standings after scoring a huge win over Boston last night. Locked On Knicks host Gavin Shaw reacted to New York's clutch dub over the Celtics.
And the process of this game was so encouraging, especially against an elite team like the Celtics. Yeah, they didn't have Jaylen Brown. I really don't want to hear about it. I think that a lot of this would still apply if they had Jaylen Brown, if not all of it. They did have Bayless Shireman, which is, essentially Jaylen Brown impact, apparently. But I'm telling you guys, this is huge. This was huge. This was really important. I'm going to explain exactly why. We just did a Knicks episode over at Hot Hand Theory. So my other podcast, Hot Hand Theory, you can check it out on YouTube after this. And a hypothesis that I pitched was basically my attempt to reconcile what we've seen from the Knicks all season versus the fact that Mike Brown is a really good coach, a really smart coach. This is a brilliant organization with a deep analytics staff. And I'm trying to reconcile that with what we've seen from them, like the ups and the downs, the weird lineups and rotations, the inconsistency from Brown himself in terms of deployment, in terms of tactical approach. And what I said was maybe the reality is that Brown is truly taking to heart that the regular season doesn't matter for the Knicks and should be used as a playing ground for experimentation. This is an idea that I've talked about all last season, and we were very frustrated with how the team was coached. Basically, with the team being coached like the regular season was the playoffs throughout the entire season. Then there's nowhere else to go when you get to the playoffs, and you don't even know what works. You don't even know what your counters are when your back is up against the wall, and you're left trying things last minute that you haven't even tried all season. And that's exactly what ended up happening. But maybe Brown has really taken this to heart. We've called for Brunson Towns' actions all season. Statistically, we know it is one of the most effective actions in the entire league this season. And some games we'd barely see it. We'd see like no Brunson Towns. It'd be like once. And shout out to Shax on Twitter, who probably has tracked the number of Brunson Towns actions that we've gotten, in the game all season. But I know for sure some games it was like 1 or 2, and some it's a lot more. Now we're starting to see it pour in. The Hawks game, we saw it. The Celtics game, we just saw it. Brunson Towns pick and roll. Towns Brunson inverted pick and roll. Towns DHOs with Brunson. Towns DHOs with Brunson into a pick and roll, empty side pick and roll, a pick and roll from the top of the key, run it with a brush screen from Josh Hart or Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, so Brunson gets ahead of steam. All of these different variations, but you put those two in actions, it is one of the most unstoppable sets in the league, like the Jokic-Murray type action, because that is how good those two offensive players are. The Celtics didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. They were desperate not to switch Keita onto Brunson, and with the big on Towns and with space around him, it's lights out. It's over. We know this. This is something we know. And for me all season, I'm like, this is something we know. I know this. Locked On Knicks listeners know this. Hot Hand Theory listeners know this. Mike Brown has to know this. So what is happening? And maybe it's not that Mike Brown was oblivious to this all season long, but he was biding his time. Why run it all season? Let's try the other stuff out that we know we may need to go to when teams come up with all the variety of counters that they're going to. But this is the dominant action, and this is a dominant action. I will run it when it's time, and this would honestly make everything make so much more sense to me. We saw Josh Hart actually shoot the ball. 0 of 2 in the first half, very hesitant. He even on one occasion passed up a wide open corner three. It was a 5-on-4. I forget who was stuck down the court for the Celtics, but it was a 5-on-4. Josh Hart wide open from the corner says, no, I'll pass it up. He vacates the corner, dribble drives, gets picked up, swings it to Mikal Bridges, who replaces him in the exact corner with the exact same shot. And then Bridges takes it and knocks it down. So it's just like, wait, what's going on? This is not a good precedent you're setting. We know how the Celtics want to attack you, Josh. Not a good precedent. We're just looking uncomfortable. But then in the second half, Josh flips his own switch and suddenly he decides he's going to go down with the shooting. He's going to go down with the ship shooting his shot. And boy, does he start shooting it. And I don't know how he decides these things, but we're going to go deeper into Josh Hart's awesome performance.
Stay up to date all here on the New York Knicks by subscribing to Locked On Knicks on your favorite podcast app. Coming up, is D'Angelo Pons, all, 5'8.5" of him, a top 25 player in the NFL draft? Most NFL analysts have Indiana defensive back D'Angelo Pons as maybe the 5th or 6th best cornerback in this draft class. Locked On NFL scouting host Kyle Crabb sat down with Trevor Sikkema and debated whether or not Pons should be much higher on draft boards.
I'm higher on D'Angelo Pons, man. I get it. He's smaller, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you he's Devon Witherspoon because I don't think he's Devon Witherspoon. But I do think that he could play on the outside because of how explosive that he is. That recovery speed is something fierce for him. Even he plays an aggressive style, and sometimes he'll guess wrong, or he'll go to punch a little too hard, and he's punched above his weight class maybe a little bit. You see the hand swipe, or a bigger receiver might be able to mitigate that pretty well, then get even and vertical with him. But that recovery speed's fantastic from him. He is so competitive. The last 2 years, he's graded really well in coverage. He's feisty. He'll defend the run with every pound that he has on his body. I just think that this is a corner who I think mentality and athletic ability for playing the cornerback position are just two paramount things. And he checks both of those boxes about as emphatically as you possibly can. So not built exactly the way you want for an outside corner. That's why I clearly have guys like Jermon McCoy and Mansour Delane above him. But in that next group, I like Brandon Cisse, he's sort of in that next conversation of players. Who's right after Cisse? Because it's like Cisse's in that next group. Hood. Yeah, I'm lower on Hood. Terrell, I love as a player, but I already kind of thought he was a little slow. And then he ran, the 4.6, mid 4.6s time at the workout that he had, which his hamstrings hurt, man. He's not a 4.6 player. I know the hamstring is hurt, but I don't love that. Like Chris Johnson's sort of maybe in that mix as well. But I'm going to tell you, I'd take Pons above everybody who's in that tier below where Mansour Delane and Jermon McCoy is.
Here's the problem. The tape is fun. D'Angelo Pons is a hell of a football player, and I would want him on my football team. But if I'm a GM, I can't chase outliers. There is an old saying in scouting that is, if you start drafting outliers, suddenly you will have a team full of outliers because there's always players to get excited about. D'Angelo Pons, at his size, would be if you're going to play him on the outside, which is part of this conversation, the smallest corner in the league as a starting boundary corner. The closest comparison you can find as someone who was a very good player at that size is Antoine Winfield Sr. That was so long ago. Antoine Winfield Sr.'s son is an all-pro in the NFL now. Antoine Winfield Jr., who's also a bit undersized, but plays safety. It's a different thing. That's the level of outlier we're talking about. So if that's a risk you want to take in the first round, okay, but understand that that's what you're doing, chasing outliers, a dangerous, dangerous game to play. And finally, the Oklahoma City Thunder aren't just good, they're historically consistent. With a win over the Clippers, OKC locked up the NBA's best record and its third consecutive number one seed, joining a short list of dynasties that usually end in multiple titles. They've stacked, get this, 132 wins over the last 2 seasons, trailing only the Jordan Bulls and peak Warriors in that span. Yes, they're in that territory now. Even with injuries and a midseason wobble, they finished strong, going 19-1 down the stretch behind Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's seeking his second straight MVP award. But as SGA put it, none of it really matters unless it ends with a ring. The scary part, history says teams like this usually get that ring. Coming up, we sit back, relax, and take in whatever the Masters has to offer us this weekend. So at least until tomorrow, stay locked on sports today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.